Hello everyone, welcome to this video about Android app development. I will be talking about some of the basics about Android app development for your education. So Android is a mobile phone operating system. More than 85% of the world uses it, so that makes it very important and very useful for implementing ideas that you might have. Also, it's managed, creating apps in Android is managed by Android Studio, which is a tool that you can get on your computer. It manages the building and execution of all apps, so it makes it very easy to create very stunning looking apps on Android Studio. It really simplifies the process. It uses a USB cable, same as the charging cable for most, if not all, phones for Android. So the basics is that an Android app corresponds to an Android Studio project. So each project will have a package name. So this package would kind of be like an inverted website URL. So say it's google.com, it would be com.google would be the package name. So this is done generally so that we can refer to packages or refer to projects in databases and in other important applications. Projects are written in XML and in Java. XML is a language similar to HTML. It's a markup language, so that means it uses tags to specify components on a screen, so it's used for layout. And then Java is used for logic. It's similar to C++, but different in many fundamental ways. It uses object-oriented programming paradigm, and it defines classes. So each one of the Java files is known as an activity, and then an activity is what will manage a certain functionality of the app, and we'll talk about those later. Projects can be built with Gradle or Maven, so these are basically build tools that those aren't really important other than loading dependencies, which are basically APIs or any sort of pre-written code that could be used in your project. So an activity. So each one of these screens on this app, this is Skype, each one of these screens represents a different functionality of the app. So recent friends is right here, chat window is here, profile view here. In an Android app, well, this is an iPhone, an Apple phone, but in an Android app, essentially each one of these screens would be managed by a different activity. So each activity will have its own code, so its own Java file, and its own layout, its own XML file. So these are called activities. And an app will consist of multiple activities strung together with many layout and code files in specific locations. So this is an overview of the types of files. So the XML files can be layout files or manifest files. So layout files are used to lay out components, as we've covered, and manifest files are used to essentially give metadata about the app. So what that means is giving information about the app, like the package name, the activities in this app, etc., etc. The very important things for the system when the system is running the app. It also includes permissions, which will be useful later on. So say if you want to use the camera of the phone, you have to get the user's permission. So that's managed through the manifest. So project locations. So here we can see if two very important locations in the project. Here we have the activity location, the Java file location. So that's seen through this is the package name, com.example.teaching is just an example one I made. And then this is where you would store all of your activity files for a basic type of app. So that's Java files. Layout files are stored in res/layout. So that's where you would store your layout information. And then apps/manifest up here is where you would store your manifest files. So types of XML layouts. So there's relative layout, where each one of the components on the screen is defined relative to other ones. It's easiest to use because you can use the drag and drop interface that Android Studio will provide. Then there's linear layout. Linear layout is kind of when components need to be stacked in a vertical or horizontal way. And then constraint layout is best for making sure that on each device, on different devices of different screen sizes, the app turns out the same. So for widgets are basically components on the screen. So any component defined in the layout file or the XML file will be a widget. It can be imported in Java from the Android widget package. So at the top of the Java file, you would put import android.widget. XML defines the basic properties of the component, and Java defines the behavior. So, for example, XML will define where a button is placed on the screen, while the Java file will define what will happen when the button is pressed. So an example here is this XML file that is showing basically the width and the height of this component. This component is a text view. So text views are basically just static text on the screen. So this will just display hello world, and its width and height will basically be enough to surround that chunk of text. And then the ID will be hello world. And then button, so this button will be a similar thing, just wrapping the text inside that says button. In Java, we would import these from the Android.widget package. Java will use a method called findViewById to get each element, and then it will do this very specific syntax that's very important, r.id. and then the ID of the particular component or widget. And then we can modify behavior, for example, setting the text. So these would be the new text on the button and the text view. So yeah, so this is another thing, that making responsive buttons. So normally we want to do something when a button is pressed. So using a listener in the Java file, essentially this syntax will allow you to do something when the button is pressed. So say I wanted to make text appear, then in this on click I would have a text view, like here we can see text.setText. I would just have it set text to something else, and then that would make that text appear on the screen when I click that button. So the emulator. So the emulator is very important for when you don't have a phone available with you. So say here, connected devices none, meaning that there are no devices connected through the USB-C cable, so I can use virtual devices. This is kind of this is more of a later topic that we'll be getting to, but basically this is important for testing out apps in a kind of an infantile stage. Later on, these don't get as useful because they can have issues with authentication. For example, logging into Google can be a hassle with those. So here's a challenge. So making an app that starts with just a button and an empty text view, and when the button is pressed, make any word show up. So in this on click listener, when you would put the code here, text.setText, and then that will show up when that is clicked, and then test it out. So this is kind of a hello world sort of activity, just making sure you have everything set up properly.